Welcome to my sewing room. We have such an exciting show for you today. We're going to explore many different avenues of embellishment. I have as a very special guest today my friend and business colleague Lana Bennett. Lana is coordinator of training and education at Singer Sewing. Now let's just share a few of these wonderful techniques with you. Home decorating is one of my favorite things to do in the whole world. Look at this very easy to make bolster pillow, which has machine cut work, simply a piece stitched onto this bolster pillow, and look how pretty that is. You know, I love purses. And this wonderful evening bag, by the way, have you seen some of the prices on some of the purses today? Believe it or not, there's a store in Dallas that has $3,000 and $4,000 purses. It was very shocking to me. Look at this beautiful handmade purse. This is a beautiful evening bag that I can assure you will not cost $3,000 or $4,000. This is the cutest little bonnet. It looks almost like a little calico bonnet. Well, it is a calico bonnet like little girls wore a long time ago. And the most fun part of this bonnet is this lattice work on the back. Isn't that cute? And then the little pink rosebud and the little ecru lace. There's also a little dress to go with that bonnet. Here is the adorable little dress to go with the bonnet with the lattice work and the little pink rosettes. A really cute little dress for a little bitty girl. You know, making the fabric first is one of the nicest parts about embellishment. You can make the fabric as we have done on this wonderful lavender vest, and then you can cut the blouse or the vest or the skirt or the doll dress or whatever you're making. Look how pretty this lattice work, the lavender ribbon is in the middle, used as lattice work on this wonderful top to go with a really pretty skirt. Of course, I adore heirloom sewing and white clothes. This is a beautiful dress which would certainly be appropriate for many occasions. And the beautiful part is these little tabs are not very hard to make, but it would take hours to do the embroidery if you did it by hand. But on this beautiful dress, it's done by machine. Going on down to the bottom of the dress, you can see more beautiful hand loom, which really isn't done by hand at all, but it's done using today's modern sewing machines. One of my favorite things to do with machine embroidery as well as hand embroidery is white on white work, as you see on this dress. And now won't you come along with me to the technique boards? Lana has made the most beautiful, very fancy day gown, or actually just a pretty christening dress. This little ecru dress has the most beautiful embellishments. This has a wonderful organza center section with machine embroidery and just a little decorative stitch with pearls sewn on. This technique where she's used ribbon in the bobbin is absolutely fabulous, and Lana's going to tell you a little bit more about that later. Come down and look at this skirt. Just too wonderful with its ribbon off the bobbin treatment, a beautiful wing needle entredeaux, and perfectly exquisite machine embroidery done in ecru, little flowers with pearls in the middle, more machine entredeaux on the bottom, and then just a beautiful embellishment. What an elegant, elegant day gown. Now, machine embellishment is one of the most wonderful, fun ways to have something very expensive looking without a whole lot of money. Look, Lana has taken the wing needle entredeaux and made her V. Then all of this pretty machine embroidery and the little heavy, and then just the stitches. This is machine embroidery, and just little stitches have been put on organza. And then using the heavy rayon thread or else the silk ribbon, this is a beautiful treatment, really an unusual treatment that comes on the outside of the wing needle entredeaux. Now, I'm going to ask Lana to show us exactly how she made this beautiful gown. And Lana, it is certainly good to have you on the show again. Lana is here with us, and she is the coordinator of training for the Singer Sewing Machine Company. Lana, thank you for being here.
Well, it's wonderful to see you again.
And please show us the wonderful techniques on this beautiful, beautiful day gown or christening dress. It's almost too fancy and pretty just to be a day gown.
I know, it is, isn't it? What's so fun about this, Martha, it's so easy to do the lattice work. Earlier you showed the old-fashioned traditional lattice work.
Yes.
And that's taking the ribbon and overlapping it, but that takes time. So this is kind of cheating a little bit, but it gives you a lighter look to it. The other is more of a heavy look that was perfect on the little bonnet, but on this little day gown, you want a nice, delicate look. So by putting the ribbon in the bobbin case, then you can really embellish very easily.
Ribbon in the bobbin case.
Yes.
Okay.
And what I have here is a 2mm silk ribbon that you actually very carefully wind on your bobbin. Or that's on the dress now. I'm going to show you another one. And this is a decor thread. And it's a rayon thread that's not spun as tightly. So I'm going to drop that down in the bobbin. And I'll give you my little dress again, get that out of the way here.
I'd like to be the keeper of the dress.
And I've threaded the top thread with the lingerie thread. I'm using a flat foot, putting that on the machine. And then I'm just going to set it up for a zigzag stitch, believe it or not. That's just created, that beautiful effect is just created with a zigzag. So I'm going to set zigzag and then to the widest width on the machine. This machine goes to 7, maybe someone else's will go to 6, but that's fine. You just set it to the longest width and the longest length. Then the secret is reverse sewing. So I'm going to take the right side of the fabric and lay it down, and then place the wrong side up, and that's how we're going to stitch. So I'm going to just use the side of the foot right along the back of the entredot, and then just begin to sew. And I'm going to slowly so I can guide what I'm doing.
I noticed you did not use a stabilizer, so you
No.
you don't have to use a stabilizer even using this wonderful heavy thread.
Right, because I did starch the fabric, so I would recommend starching your fabric, and then the flat foot actually will give you a little more stability. I'll just do one side for the sake of time here. Now the machine does have a built-in needle thread cutter, but I prefer not to use it with the heavier threads. I treat my machines with tender, loving care. But you can see the difference here. This gives you a shiny effect when you turn it over, and a very different effect than what the day gown with the silk ribbon.
Really pretty, Lana, and so easy. And you know how I love the word easy.
Yes, very
So
easy.
you did the ribbon over here on the day gown. Let's put it over
Yes.
here so our viewers can see that one more time. The silk ribbon was on the bobbin on that one.
Yes, and that was done down along the bottom, and then also on the little piece of organdy organza down here. We did the silk ribbon, and again, using a flat foot and starching it a little bit, you can just stitch without a stabilizer.
Didn't have to use a stabilizer.
No, and then just press it when you're finished.
Oh, Lana, that is a fascinating technique. Thank you so much for sharing
You're
it.
welcome.
And now Lana has another technique for you, sewing for your baby. Lana and I were just discussing how much fun it is to do machine embroidery. And Lana, I have a true confession. One of the main reasons I sew is just for fun and stress relief, and just the joy of doing something not just having fun with it.
Right.
I say not, so I say not thinking. Sometimes I do think when I sew. But anyway, how much fun it is to embellish. And that beautiful christening dress, show us what you've done there.
Oh, this was a lot of fun to do, and believe it or not, I found a floral design that was very similar to the lace, so I was very excited to find that on our stock design card. And I've actually had a large flower and then a smaller one. So a lot of times I'll make a pattern of what I'm going to embellish, so I can kind of place where I want the designs, and that's a lot of the fun too, is creating
It's the
design.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So I've sewn on an organza type fabric and then overlaid it onto the day gown. And that's very easy to do too if you're not real comfortable with how something's going to be placed on a garment. That can be frightening sometimes. So an overlay is a real easy way to get started with your placement and so forth. And we've just stitched it on. And again, with the embellishment, things like beads and buttons and ribbons are so much fun to really finish off your project and give it a real professional look.
It's a part of that creativity. And Lana, when I'm doing baby clothes or things for my grandchildren, of course I used to do them for Joanna, but now it's my precious grandbabies. It's just, I just think about them the whole time I'm doing that.
I know, that's what's so much fun. here's the piece just started here. And as I mentioned, a lot of times I'll make a pattern so that you can kind of see exactly where it's going to lay out and placement and so forth. And on this very sheer fabric, I used a wash-away type stabilizer, which almost has a look like wax paper, and it will actually wash away. And when the flower and design is so delicate and intricate and the fabric is so sheer, this really is a wonderful thing to use. So the wash-away stabilizer is a great secret to embroidering on delicate fabrics.
Because you don't like to see those little specks that are left in there of
Yes.
a tearaway with really delicate rose embroidery like that pretty
Right.
lace you made.
Yeah, so you spend hours picking out the embroidery, behind the embroidery. All right, I have a design programmed in, and on this machine it's on a card like this, and it goes right in, and the design comes up, and you just start and begin to sew. And it does all the work for you.
I never get tired of watching the machine embroidery and just seeing that work.
Yeah.
Lana, thank you so much for being here and for sharing your beautiful methods and your beautiful day gown. And next, I have a wonderful craft for you. This is such an easy and quick little craft project. This is a trivet made with a block of wood on the bottom and little corks on the top. Now it's very easy to do. Just take a block of wood and then get a little bit of stain that has maybe a shiny finish on it and let it dry. After this is completely dry, take some glue, put your glue on the board, and then these little corks that you purchase at the craft store, you simply glue them on in whatever design you want to glue them. And if you're like I am, and the few times a year when you really cook a big meal, I never have enough trivets. So this is a really nice thing to have. And also on these corks, you can put one right beside your stove and actually put a hot pot that has just come off your eye on this too. A really quick and really nice gift idea and a great kids project. And next I have a drawn thread embroidery technique for you, demonstrated by my friend Claudia Newton. I'm so pleased to have as my guest today my dear friend and business colleague, Claudia Newton. Claudia is the editorial director of the Fancy Work portion of So Beautiful magazine. She is a wonderful needle artist, and she has also studied at the Japanese School of Embroidery. Claudia, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Martha. I'm pleased to be here. What we're going to do today is a form of hem stitching called Italian hem stitch, and it's actually a composite stitch, which means that we'll use 3 different bands to make up this one decorative stitch. The sample that we have is actually on a baby blanket, and let me tell you a little bit about it. We'll show you later more how it looks when it's finished, but for now, this is what I want you to see. This is our hem stitch band, and above it we have just a little chain stitch baby embroidered with a little sweet embroidery with flowers, and we'll talk about that a little bit in a minute too. But the first thing I want to tell you is how to make this little band. So the first thing you have to do is decide on the hem depth. Once you know the depth of your hem, I'm showing this on a large weave so that you can see the stitches better, but what you do is to turn up the little turn under, turn up the hem allowance, and that shows you where your line of threads will be drawn out. Pull out the first one before you turn up the hem, and that way your hem will be turned up on the straight grain. So once I know how deep it's going to be, I've got the first thread out. I finish pulling out the threads. This is how it'll look when I start to work on it. I've turned under the edge and basted it down so that I have now my area of drawn threads above where I can embroider. The stitch is very simple. It's called a simple hem stitch on this first area. You work with the hem towards you. The turn down edge will be above you with your drawn threads. And you simply loop the thread around and pick up, this time I'm going to pick up 4 threads in my bundle, slip the needle under and pick up the bundle, wrap it around the threads, and then all you do is to pick up a couple of threads in the hem. That anchors it and gives you a place to pull it down. So there's no knot involved, it's just a loop. I'll loop it around again. Whoops, I got 3. Pick up 4 threads in my bundle, pull it through and wrap it. Take the hem that way, and I don't need to come through that loop. I've looped it too far. Let me show you again. Come through and pick it up. This way I'll just pick it up straight without making a full loop because I don't want a knot. Let me show you one more time so you won't be confused. I loop it around, pick up my 4 threads, draw it through, and then pick up the hem. Once I've done that all the way across, you'll have a finished section that looks like this. Now, to do the next section, I need to work over a fabric band, so I don't want to pull out all of these threads in between. What I do is to decide how many threads I'm going to leave to make my band as wide as I want it, and I generally make the fabric band about twice as wide as the drawn thread areas. So what I do is to move up to where the fabric band should stop, pull out the next area of drawn threads here, and I'm ready to begin stitching the center line. The way the center band is stitched is still very easy. You still loop around and pick up bundles, but we're going to do it from top to bottom to make a design across the center. What I would do is I've got it anchored here. I'm going to begin with a top stitch, so I've got it at the top already, and you'll pick up, if you're going to start with a top stitch, anchor at the bottom. If you're going to start with a bottom stitch, pick up at the top. So mine's already been anchored. If I were going to start now, I would anchor down here, drag the thread up. I've made the first stitch, so let me show you how to make the next one. Pick up the bottom bundle just like we did before, and you pick up the same bundles as you did the first time. Bring it through, and I have to wrap it completely around that bundle so that it'll wrap and pull. I move across the back of the fabric to the top, pick up the same bundle of threads on the top. Got my threads tangled up because I want to show you how to tie off in a minute. I wrap it around. This time I wrap it completely around and bring the needle back to the front, and I'm unthreaded. Okay. Let me see if I have time to rethread here real quick. Yes, okay. I've wrapped around. I bring it completely around this time and out the other side because I want to move down the front of the fabric this time, back to the bottom. This time I wrap it so that I move across the back of the fabric to the top. I wrap it again, loop it around so that I'm on the front this time, and move back to the bottom. Now I'm going to stop right here because if you run out of thread, you need to stop at the top. Just park that thread up here out of your way. Bring in the second thread and park it at the bottom. But you want to leave a long tail this time, so that you'll have room to tie. And I'm just going to hold it here as if I had a stitch down there. Loop it. I'm going to take one stitch to show you how this works. Remember, I'm moving behind up to the top. Pick up those threads. I'll take one bottom stitch, and then we're going to tie these two together. So this stitch, I'm going to pretend that I have stitched all the way across, and we're now ready to finish this off. Take the 2 loose thread tails, they're on the back side. When I tie this, you won't see from my hands for a minute, I'm going to loop it twice. I've wrapped that once, I wrap it twice. By doing that, when I pull it down, it'll stay where it's supposed to. The knot doesn't flip out. I'll wrap it twice more and tie it so that the knot winds up in the center of the band. You clip them off and they don't show from the front. If you try to tie off at the top or at the bottom, that knot will show from the front side. So that's how you finish that. Once the center band is finished, you go to the top edge, do exactly the thing we did before, and I'm going to turn it so it's facing me. I wrap it around, and this time, even though I have no hem there, I'm going to pick up 2 fabric threads to anchor that knot down. Finish stitching all the way across that edge, and that gives you the finished look of the hem stitch. And you can see here that we have the 3 rows, a green row of simple hem stitch, the blue row of the decorative stitch in the middle, and then another row of the green hem stitch to finish it off. The last thing that I want to talk to you about is when you do the embroidery on here, if you will take the threads and say I've done a stem stitch for a stem, and we'll pretend this is a little split back stitch that I've tied on. And once I've done a stem stitch here across, then if I need to go back down and put a leaf on my stem, Since this is going to show a little bit on the back side, this will shadow through. Instead of just coming down here and dragging the thread across and making a stitch down there, I would take it to the back, then weave it back through the stitches on the back side, pull it down snug until I get back to where the leaf should be, then bring it back to the surface, and you're ready to make the leaf, and you don't have threads trailing across the back of it. So that's a neat way to finish the embroidery.
Oh, Claudia, thank you so much for such an elegant project. And now we have a sewing trick in the Sewing for Baby idea. This beautiful baby blanket, I'd like for you to take a little close look before Claudia shows us how to construct it. This is such a pretty little decor with the beautiful chain stitch baby and the little blue bullion rosebuds and the beautiful hem stitching that Claudia has just shared with you how to do. Now, Claudia, how do you put this blanket together?
Okay, it's really very simple. We're going to call this a blanket rather than a quilt because it's not real puffy. What I've done, I have a shadow layer in there too, so let's talk about the way this is layered to put it together. These are the layers for my back piece. I have an inner layer, I have the shadow layer, and then I have a layer of Nylona, which will be the outside layer. When I've done that, I've basted all of these back layers together, so they're one piece now. I've done the same thing on the front. The difference is that on the front, after I've put all the fabric layers together, I have a layer of cotton batting behind it. And this is a very thin batting. The next thing you do is to place the border piece onto the right side of the quilt front, fold them together, and stitch it right sides together. Then the trick that I have, you stitch it just across the top edge, press the seam allowance toward the batting side, and from the right side, zigzag that seam allowance in place. When you do, that helps to keep the turn back from flipping up once it's been turned right side out and pressed. Once you've done that, turn it back, right sides together again, stitch across both sides, leave an opening at the bottom, turn it right side out, and you can see here where the quilting lines were. This is very simple. I moved in 6 inches from the edge, quilt in a square, then come back and add straight lines inside that so that it's very basic quilting, but it's enough to anchor the batting. Then you slip stitch the bottom and you're done.
Well, this is so pretty, and I love that little linen fold over at the top with your beautiful embellishment on the batiste quilt.
Thank you.
And now won't you come to my attic with me? If any of you know how to crochet, this is the perfect little dress for you to copy. Made ever so easily. The tatting across the shoulders has little buttons, and this is the way it closes. This little straight strip has the hand hem stitching, but you of course could do it by machine. This is a beautiful little piece of tatted insertion, which is also mitered and goes around. And by the way, the back is exactly like the front. Come on down the skirt and see this magnificent pulled, drawn thread work, hand hem stitching, beautiful piece of crochet, handmade crochet, another strip with the hem stitching, and a piece of crocheted insertion, and a piece of crocheted edging. You know, crocheted lace is one of my very favorite laces. I have a Sewing from the Heart sent to me on the internet by Kimberly Carter. We are an all-volunteer group of ladies sewing for God's tiny angels. We sew, crochet, knit, and quilt for newborns in need. We have found the greatest need for help and are trying to find the need with blessed hands. We have 19 ladies so far donating handmade items that they make to Indiana and West Virginia. As our group grows with members, we hope to expand our donation areas until all the needs of the newborns are met. We found when we first started about 3 months ago that some babies were going home and nothing more than a diaper and a hospital blanket. And Kimberly Carter has written a really sweet quotation I'd like to read for you. To the world, you might be just one person, but to a child, you just might be the world. Kimberly, I'm so glad that you and your group of ladies are sewing for those little children. You keep up the good work. Thank you for joining me in my sewing room today, and I'd like to invite you to come back next time.